Welcome to the cave. We had big news recently. New Pokémon games were announced and we got a small glimpse to the region, the new Pokémon and the logos for the games. Enough to set the community on fire and get them excited for the products, but there isn't enough to talk about lore. Or is it? I immediately noticed some interesting things in the direct. Almost obvious things, I will say. I did some research and I think I found where they might be going with this. Of course, everything I am about to say is going to be pure speculation. I could be totally wrong, but there is no fun if there's no risk. So I found some interesting things, and with the help of a fellow theorist, Eduardo, I polished some details and made more connections related to what could be the lore of the games. Thanks to Ed, by the way, I encourage all of you to check his work, going deep into the symbolism of the Pokémon franchise. So now we are going to talk about Norse and Germanic mythology, history, and the Jewish Kabbalah. All of these different sources of inspiration seem to have influenced the design of what we've seen of the GALAR region. We will try to find how this could influence the plot of the games and also the possibility of a third version in the future. I'm also going to explore the possible inspirations behind the map of the region and the reason why we got these titles. Yeah, I know it sounds like a lot, but hold on with me for a second. Let's talk about Vikings. The Galar region is very clearly inspired in the United Kingdom, or at least part of it. The Vikings repeatedly invaded the British Islands during the period of time of around 300 years, starting in the last few centuries of the first millennium of the Christian era. The games are named Sword and Shield. Both weapons appear in the logos for the games, but they have what seems to be wolves in their top. What are those two wolves? As many others, I noticed the similarities between a symbol shown in the trailer and a prominent symbol from Norse tradition. There is the circular symbol which appears outside of what seems to be the gems, or some type of battle facility, and also in the sleeves of the player's clothes. What this brings to mind is a skull and hati, two wolves from Norse mythology. This is nothing new for the franchise. The legendary trio from X and Y is based on Norse mythology, specifically the creatures living within Yggdrasil, the world tree holding the 9 realms of Norse cosmology. Sirnias is the 4 stacks of Midgard. Eibeltal is the eagle standing in the top of the tree, and in the roots we find Nidhogg, the serpent who is inspiration for Sigurd. And this dragon creature has a connection with the previously mentioned wolves. Before going into detail about this, you have to know that in Norse mythology many concepts tend to get mixed and overlap, mainly because it was transmitted through oral culture rather than scripture. They had rituals and hierarchies, but they didn't have a coded dogma. There was no single authoritative version of a myth, and they also took elements from multiple cultures like Greek mythology, Shamanistic European tradition, Germanic mythology, as Vikings were a group descended from that culture, Christianism, and even I've seen people mention the possibility of Zoroastrianism coming into play. Going back to Skull and Hati, they are represented as the wolves that eternally chase Sol and Mani, the sun and the moon. But at one point they do reach the sun and the moon and devour them, starring Ragnarok, the apocalypse of Norse mythology. In this moment, the tree will tremble as Nidhogg has been eating its roots. At the same time, Jormungandr, an Ouroboros resting in the sea eating its own tail, will rise and take his place in the end of the times. In alchemy, this represents the completion of the work. Here, it's the world what has come to an end. These two dragons tend to overlap, and they also do in Sigurd's design. The 3 main forms of the Order Pokémon are based in the children of Loki, god of chaos. Sigurd in its 50% form is the serpents, the 100% form is Hel, the goddess who resides in the lower part of the World Tree, in the underworld. Meanwhile, Sigurd's 10% form is based off two things: Garm, Hel's hound and guardian of Hel, and also based in the third of Loki's children, Fenrir. Fenrir is the father of Skoll and Hati. When his children reach the chariots of Sun and Moon, Fenrir is freed from Gleipnir, the rope binding him, then fulfills the prophecy, killing Odin, the main god of this religion. This gives us an explanation to the walls of the logos, and maybe even the plot for the games. An evil organization is trying to start Ragnarok, releasing Fenrir, a bigger legendary wolf, in these games or in a third version, which is interesting because the three wolves related to the sun and the moon were already present in Gen 7. Lycanroc has three forms: dusk, midnight and midday. I wouldn't be surprised if that rock at the end of their names isn't only because of the rock typing. But this is Norse mythology, so there is another way we could interpret this, and this fits even better. At first, this might not seem to relate to Pokémon, but I will explain why. See, Skoll and Hati are not the only group of two wolves of Norse mythology. I present to you Geri and Freki, the hounds of Odin, those who stand by his throne and eat with him at his table. They were his partners while hunting and his companions in battle. Odin was, between other things, the god of war and hunting. His warrior side could be inherited from Tyr, a god that is believed to have been the main deity of the Germanic mythology prior to Odin, and the adoption of those beliefs by the Vikings. The name Tyr is proof of this, as it is literally a way of saying God. And both Odin and Tyr seem to overlap at some points, but I'll get to that later. Odin was described as the weapon-decked god. What weapons? The weapons he holds while sitting in his throne with his wolves. As you can see, he has a sword and a shield. You can already see the connection here. Geri and Freki were Odin's partners in war, as stated in different Old Norse poems. It wouldn't be weird to see Odin holding his sword and shield while his hounds ran by his side in the battlefield. Maybe the third legendary isn't a wolf, maybe it's Odin. Or even better, we could have both recreating the conflict in the final moments of Ragnarok. I will come back to the third version later. Another interesting detail to point out is that this will be important for the cabalistic symbolism in the games. Odin carries two ravens in his shoulders, and these birds tell him everything they hear and think. Their names are Hugin and Munin, literally meaning thought and mind. If you add these two ravens to the fact that Odin has only one eye, he gave his eye as a sacrifice in his pursuit for wisdom, we have a trinity with only one eye. A symbol similar to the all-seeing eye, concept related to the sacred delta of Masonic symbolism, which represents the union of the first three Sephiroth of the Tree of Life from the Kabbalah. And this is God, the creator, watching over the rest of his work. Concept which I already explained in a different theory influenced the Lake Trio. In the case of Odin, this is represented with the Valknut, symbol related to the Triskelion, another symbol which inspired the flag of the Isle of Man, island located next to the UK. Now, this quintet is God in its ethereal existence. That might be why Odin didn't eat, only drank wine and spoke only in poetry. And the ravens are the all-seeing part, as they fly to the ends of the earth each day to return in the evening and tell Odin the news. The dogs are hunters, they bring the food and they are the ones who eat at Odin's table. They are God as provider. So we should expect a Raven legendary Pokémon or some character who uses Markrows, taking inspiration from Odin. Going back to the third version, Odin has a very noticeable third weapon, a spear. and I think that will be the third version if we do get one. Odin's spear has a name, Gungnir, a spear said to be so well made you don't need any skill to hit the target. And when will Odin use this spear according to the myths? He will use it at Ragnarok to fight the wolf Fenrir. And guess what? One of the runes by which Gungnir was described appears in the games. And it was also sometimes called Tyr, the same as the Germanic deity that preceded Odin. Interestingly, in the Norse tradition, Tyr was the one to bound Fenrir using Gleipnir, but in order to do that he had to allow the wolf to eat his right hand. So we are totally getting this conflict between Odin and Fenrir represented in some way. Not to mention some altars dedicated to Tyr were found in Hadrian's wall. Wait, Odin doesn't have his right eye and Tyr is missing his right hand. This is making a comeback in Gen 8! Nah, he won't, but if he does, I called it. I haven't already talked about the map of the region, and that will give us the opportunity to expand on the sword and shield titles. Odin once buried his sword deep within Bramstokkr, a mighty tree supporting and sprouting through the roof of Volsung's hall. Then he said, "The man to pull the sword from the trunk shall receive it from me as a gift." This will go on to influence the legend of King Arthur and Excalibur. But what we want to take from this is that Bramstokkr always is linked to Yggdrasil, and Yggdrasil is clearly related to the Tree of Life of the Kabbalah, a symbol that also has a significance in alchemy, the biggest inspiration behind the legendary Pokémon of Alola. This symbol shows the process of the light pouring from God's mind going down to the earth, the creation. And this is the biggest influence in the map of the region. Because if you put the tree over the map of Galar, you get an almost perfect match. What the Tree of Life shows is the path that humankind needs to take to go back to its primal state, to how it was before eating from the forbidden fruit of knowledge. The tree is upside down. The earth Malkuth is the fruit, and in the roots we find Keter, and before that, God prior to its self-manifestation. Many fans have already pointed out that some places in the map seem to be upside down, like London appearing to be in the north of the region with Big Ben, Wembley Stadium and the London Eye clearly visible. Meanwhile, what seems to be Loch Ness is located in the south. If this is correct, this goes perfectly with the upside down Tree of Life, but if not, the match still works. But the best part of all of this is that they left a hint in the title for the trailer. This title has many alchemical and cabalistic connotations, but especially if you have to consideration that the map of the region seems to be a sword, with that big building at the top as a hidden handle. The lightning flash coming down the Sephiroth is also known as the path of the flaming sword, as after Adam and Eve were exiled from the Garden of Eden, a flaming sword was placed to guard the Tree of Life, and the way back up the tree is called the Path of the Serpent, where moving in zigzag between the Sephiroth keeping balance, one can reach the heights of Eden again. Also, sometimes the light of God, once it reaches Malkuth, is identified with Shekinah, the feminine aspect of the presence of God, as the higher worlds of the tree are referred to as masculine, and Malkuth is the feminine part where life is created. Also, Shekinah can be seen as a shield in cabalistic thought, opposing to the masculine sword above Keter. So, what do I expect? A third version or legendary representing Ragnarok, either as Odin or Fenrir, or maybe both representing a new beginning. and I expect our adventure through the Galar region being a metaphor for climbing up the tree of life, and as we go up the path of the serpent, our pursuit for the title of champion will symbolize that path into greatness. Or maybe we catch Pokémon and fight an evil organization of people who are bad.